Emily walked into the luxurious hotel lobby, feeling a rush of excitement mixed with a hint of nerves. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway with her friends. No cameras, no paparazzi, just a quiet retreat to escape the chaos of her famous father's world. Her father, Keanu Reeves, was well known for his grounded nature, and despite his global fame, he'd raised Emily to live a humble life. She didn't want anyone to know who her dad was. To her, he was just Dad, a kind, normal man who happened to be in the public eye. The lobby of the hotel was grand, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling and plush velvet chairs scattered throughout. Everything about the place screamed luxury, and Emily couldn't help but feel out of place in her simple hoodie and jeans, despite knowing she belonged here. She was just about to check in when the receptionist, Jessica, a young woman in her late 20s, looked up from her computer screen, eyes narrowing slightly as she scanned Emily's attire. "Can I help you?" Jessica's tone was more dismissive than professional. She barely made eye contact, more interested in typing away at her keyboard than actually greeting a guest. Emily, trying to keep things light, smiled politely. "Hi, I'm here to check in. I have a reservation under the name Emily Reeves." Jessica's fingers paused on the keyboard, her eyes flicking up with a small, almost imperceptible smirk. "Reeves, huh? Interesting. You sure you're in the right place?" she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She glanced Emily up and down, her expression suggesting that she didn't believe someone like Emily could afford a room at a hotel like this. Emily blinked, momentarily taken aback by the harshness. Yes, I'm sure. My reservation should be under Emily Reeves." Jessica didn't respond immediately. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, inspecting Emily with a condescending grin before slowly typing into the computer. "Right, well, this isn't a place for people who think they can just waltz in and pretend to be something they're not," Jessica remarked, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "This isn't a Hollywood hotel. Maybe you're used to staying in places where you can just show up, but here we actually expect people to be, well, respectable." The sting of Jessica's words hit Emily like a slap in the face. She stood there, her throat tightening as she tried to swallow the embarrassment that rose in her chest. How could someone treat her like this without even knowing who she was? She was about to respond when one of her friends, Megan, caught the exchange and spoke up. "Hey, what's your problem? Why are you talking to her like that?" Megan's voice was firm, but Emily placed a hand on her friend's arm, trying to diffuse the situation. "Let's just get our keys and go," Emily muttered, her face flushed with frustration. She wasn't about to let some random receptionist ruin her weekend. She tried to keep her cool, but the sting of Jessica's words lingered. Just as she was about to reach for her ID, Jessica's voice called out again, her tone dripping with mockery. "You know, for someone who thinks she's so important, maybe next time you could at least try to look the part." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of anger and humiliation flooding her veins. She turned to Megan, trying to regain composure, but in the back of her mind a thought gnawed at her. Why was this happening? Unbeknownst to Jessica, she had just made a huge mistake. Emily had no desire to throw her father's name around, but the idea of being disrespected in this way was too much to ignore. What should Emily do now? Would she stand up for herself, or would she let the receptionist's words slide just to avoid conflict? Before we dive deeper into this intense story, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned to find out what happens next. Trust me, you won't. Want to miss how this all unfolds? Emily took a deep breath as she followed Megan and the rest of her friends into the elevator. The encounter with the receptionist still stung, but she couldn't let it ruin the trip. She had enough experience in life to know how to brush off rude comments, but for some reason, Jessica's words had hit harder than usual. Growing up as Keanu Reeves' daughter had its share of ups and downs. While her father was a household, Dame Emily's world had always been one of quiet privacy. Keanu never allowed the Hollywood life to consume them. He made sure Emily knew that fame wasn't everything. For as long as she could remember, he had always been the same calm, grounded presence in her life. He wasn't just Keanu Reeves, the actor. He was simply Dad, the man who would read her stories before bed, the man who would sit with her for hours on end, talking about everything from philosophy to her latest favorite books. Emily's mother had passed away when she was just a toddler, leaving Keanu to raise her alone. He never remarried, pouring all his love and attention into making sure she had everything she needed. Yet, in a way, this left her somewhat isolated. She didn't have the family gatherings many of her friends had. It was just her and Dad, two peas in a pod. Despite the occasional privilege of having a famous father, Emily felt the weight of the world's expectations. People often treated her differently, assuming she was entitled or spoiled because of her father's wealth. But Emily had always been the opposite. She chose to attend a regular college, blending in with other students. She didn't want to be that girl, the one who used her last name to get ahead. In fact, no one at her university knew who her father was. She kept it that way intentionally, preferring to make friends based on who she was, not who her father happened to be. Her friends, Megan, Sarah, and Lily, had been with her through thick and thin. None of them knew she was Keanu Reeves' daughter, and Emily intended to keep it that way. To them, she was just Emily, the girl who loved to go on adventures, make everyone laugh, and occasionally stumble into embarrassing situations. They didn't see her as a celebrity offspring. They saw her as one of their own, and that's exactly how she wanted it. But now, standing in the elevator, Emily couldn't help but feel a bit disconnected from that version of herself. The receptionist had made her feel like nothing more than a walking stereotype. She wasn't a famous daughter. She was a regular young woman who just wanted to be treated with respect. So, why was it so difficult for people to see that? You okay? Megan's voice broke her out of her thoughts. Emily gave a small smile. Yeah, I'm fine. I guess I'm just used to dealing with that kind of thing, but I didn't expect it here in a place like this. Megan, who had always been protective of Emily, raised an eyebrow. That was ridiculous. You don't need to take that from anyone. I know, Emily replied, running a hand through her hair. But it's just, sometimes I wonder why I keep things so hidden. It's not like it changes anything about who I am. As the elevator doors opened, they all stepped out into the hallway. The hotel was every bit as luxurious as it had looked downstairs, sleek and modern, with art on every wall and soft ambient lighting. But Emily felt anything but relaxed. The confrontation with Jessica had shaken her more than she cared to admit. She longed for the quiet moments with her father, where no one cared who he was, where she didn't have to be anyone other than herself. Her father had raised her with values that centered around kindness, humility, and authenticity. Values that she tried to live by every day. She didn't want to use his fame to get what she wanted, but sometimes it felt like that was all people saw when they looked at her. Keanu had always told her that fame was fleeting. What mattered was how you treated people and how you stayed true to yourself. But as Emily unlocked the door to their suite, she couldn't help but feel disillusioned. If she could live a life without being constantly judged for something she didn't choose, maybe she could finally feel at peace. Let's just enjoy the weekend, she said, trying to push the thoughts out of her head. We're here to relax, right? Exactly, Megan agreed. We'll forget all about that rude receptionist, and besides, we've got a lot of fun planned. Emily nodded, but deep down, the seed of doubt had been planted. As much as she wanted to have a carefree weekend, she knew the chance of escaping who she was, who her father was slim. But she wasn't going to let it define her. Not today, not this weekend. Let's grab some dinner, Emily said, trying to shift her focus. I'm starving. As the group moved toward the dining area, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the weekend would turn out to be more than just an escape. It would become a turning point in her life, one where she had to decide how much of herself she was willing to reveal to the world. Have you ever felt like you were being judged based on something you couldn't control? Maybe because of who you are or who you're related to. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Emily's journey. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. The first night at the hotel should have been relaxing, a break from the chaos that often surrounded Emily's life. But as the days went on, the tension with the receptionist, Jessica, continued to linger in her mind. Emily found herself constantly looking over her shoulder when passing the front desk, half expecting Jessica to make some passive-aggressive comment. Every time she walked by, she could feel Jessica's eyes on her, studying her as if waiting for her to slip up in some way. The next morning, Emily and her friends decided to take a dip in the hotel's pool. As they made their way to the outdoor area, the sound of the water and the sunshine helped wash away some of the tension from the previous day. They found a spot by the pool and settled in, chatting and laughing as they soaked in the warmth. But Emily couldn't fully relax. She kept glancing up at the entrance to the pool area, half expecting to see Jessica lurking nearby. Sure enough, after a few minutes, she spotted Jessica walking past with a clipboard, heading toward the poolside lounge chairs. Emily's stomach tightened. "Why is she here?" Emily murmured under her breath, just loud enough for Megan to hear. "Who knows? Maybe she's taking a break from making people's lives miserable," Megan replied, her tone sharp. Emily laughed lightly, but couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica's presence would make everything awkward again. Sure enough, as soon as Jessica saw Emily, she gave a knowing smirk and started heading their way. Emily's heart sank. She wanted to ignore it, to pretend it didn't bother her, but there was something about the way Jessica carried herself that made it impossible to just let it go. "Hey," Jessica called out, her tone feigning politeness. "I just wanted to remind you that the pool is for hotel guests only. You wouldn't want to cause any trouble, right?" Emily blinked in confusion. What was this about? She hadn't seen Jessica interact with anyone else this way. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable looks, unsure of how to respond, before Emily could say anything. Megan shot back. "Are you seriously accusing us of sneaking into the pool? We're guests, just like anyone else here." Jessica rolled her eyes, clearly not bothered by the confrontation. "Sure, whatever you say," she responded, then turned to walk away. But before she disappeared into the hotel's interior, she looked back over her shoulder with a smirk that only made Emily feel more uncomfortable. Emily took a deep breath, trying to push the interaction out of her mind. The last thing she wanted was for Jessica to control the mood of the weekend. She glanced at her friends, who were clearly feeling the tension too. "Don't let her get to you," Sarah said quietly, squeezing Emily's hand in solidarity. "She's just one person. You're here to have fun. Let's enjoy this." But it wasn't just Jessica's rude remarks that were bothering Emily. It was the constant battle inside her mind. Should I tell them who I am? She wasn't ashamed of being Keanu Reeves's daughter, but she didn't want to use it as a shield or weapon to get what she wanted. It felt like her fame, or the perception of it, was always hanging over her head, just waiting to complicate things. "Maybe we should talk to the manager," Lily suggested quietly. "This is ridiculous. No one should be treated like that." Emily shook her head, trying to maintain her calm. "It's not worth it. Let's just let it go. We've got more important things to do than deal with her." But as much as she wanted to forget about the confrontation, a part of her was already bracing for the next interaction with Jessica. Deep down, Emily knew this wouldn't be the last time. The question was, how far would Jessica go before Emily finally stood up for herself? Later that afternoon, the group decided to go for a walk around the hotel's property. It was a sprawling estate, with manicured gardens and private paths that led to a serene pond. As they wandered, Emily's mind continued to race. She found herself lost in thought, wondering if there was a way to just make everything easier, to stop hiding behind the mask of a regular college student, to stop pretending she didn't have a famous last name. But she quickly reminded herself that she didn't need to be defined by her father's fame. She could still be Emily, a girl who loved spending time with her friends, exploring new places, and finding peace in the quiet moments. She just wished the world could see her that way. As they walked back toward the hotel, Emily spotted a familiar face walking toward them. It was the manager, a tall man in his 40s with a kind smile. Emily had seen him earlier that morning and assumed he was just another member of the hotel staff, not someone she needed to worry about. But as they neared him, the manager stopped and gave a polite nod to the group. "Good afternoon, ladies," he said, addressing them all with a warm, welcoming tone. "I hope you're enjoying your stay so far." Emily smiled back, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's been great." "Thank you." Then, almost as if sensing her unease, the manager's expression softened. "I've heard some concerns about your experience with the front desk. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay and that you're having a pleasant stay." Emily hesitated for a moment. Should she speak up about Jessica's rude behavior? Would it make things worse? But before she could answer, Megan spoke up, her voice low but firm. "To be honest, we've had a few issues with the receptionist, Jessica. She's been rude and dismissive. It's been a bit uncomfortable." The manager's eyes widened slightly, in surprise. "I'm so sorry to hear that. Please let me know if it happens again. We take guest satisfaction very seriously." Emily gave a small nod, thankful for the manager's understanding. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory. At least someone at the hotel cared. As they continued walking, Emily couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and unease. She had stood up for herself, and it had felt good. But she knew deep down that things weren't over yet. This was just the beginning of something bigger, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what was to come. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was treating you unfairly? How did it feel? Share your thoughts below and make sure to hit subscribe. Because Emily's journey is just getting started. You won't want to miss what happens next. The next day, the hotel felt different. Emily tried to push the events with Jessica out of her mind, but the tension between them remained, palpable in every interaction. As the group prepared for their last full day at the hotel, Emily couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something bigger was on the horizon. Around noon, Emily and her friends decided to head out for a hike on one of the private trails that ran along the edge of the hotel property. The weather was perfect, sunlight filtering through the trees, a gentle breeze, carrying the scent of pine. They had just finished a light lunch, and everyone was eager to get away from the hotel's stuffy atmosphere and into the fresh air. Emily, always the adventurer, led the way down the winding path, chatting with her friends and laughing. The quinoa. Tension from earlier in the weekend had begun to fade, and she was starting to feel more like herself again. The sound of birds singing and the rustling of leaves underfoot made her feel calm, something she hadn't felt since arriving. But the peaceful walk was abruptly interrupted when they reached a clearing near the edge of the property. There, sitting, on a large rock in the middle of the clearing, was Jessica. She was flipping through her phone, seemingly lost in her own world. At first, Emily considered turning around and going back, but then, to her surprise, Jessica looked up. Her eyes met Emily's, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The awkward silence hung in the air, thick with the unresolved tension between them. Finally, Jessica stood up, brushing off the dirt from her shorts. "Hey, I didn't expect to see you out here. This trail isn't really for guests, you know," she said, her tone dripping with passive-aggressive sweetness. Emily's heart sank. Here we go again, she thought. But this time, she wasn't going to let Jessica get away with it. The words she'd been holding back for the past few days were bubbling to the surface. "This is a public trail, Jessica," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. "We're guests here, just like you. We have every right to be on this property." Jessica rolled her eyes but didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked Emily up and down, a smug grin spreading across her face. "Right," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "You must be guests, because you certainly don't look like the type who would belong here." Emily clenched her fists, trying to stay composed. "I don't need this," she thought. But something in her snapped, and before she could stop herself, she spoke again. "You know I've had enough of your rude comments, Jessica," she said, her voice low but steady. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" For the first time, Jessica's smug expression faltered. "What do you mean?" Emily took a deep breath. "It's time," she thought. "Time to end this charade. My name is Emily Reeves," she said, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. "My father is Keanu Reeves." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Jessica's face went white as she processed what Emily had just said. Her eyes widened, and for a moment she was speechless. "Wait," Jessica said, her voice wavering. Are you serious?" Emily nodded, her chest tightening. "Yeah, I am. But you don't need to worry about that. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to be treated differently. I just wanted to enjoy this trip, like any other person would. But now I realize it's impossible to escape people's assumptions about me." The silence between them was deafening. Jessica stood there, frozen, her face flushed with embarrassment. Emily could see her scrambling for something to say, some way to undo the damage she'd just caused. I... I'm sorry, Jessica stammered, her eyes flickering with guilt. I didn't know. I had no idea. I mean, I just assumed. Emily interrupted, her voice firm. And that's the problem, Jessica. You assumed. You assumed I was just some girl who didn't belong here. You assumed that because of the way I looked, I didn't deserve to be treated with respect. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Emily felt a strange sense of satisfaction, knowing that Jessica had finally been forced to confront her own bias. Look, Emily continued, her tone softening slightly. I get it. People see me, and they automatically think they know who I am, but that's not who I am. I'm just trying to live my life, and all I want is to be treated like everyone else. The group of friends who had been standing off to the side watching the interaction unfold now stepped forward. Megan, Sarah, and Lily gave Emily a supportive look, standing by her side. Jessica's face was red now, but she seemed to have no words left to defend herself. After a long pause, she nodded, her shoulders slumping. I'm really sorry, Emily. I didn't mean to treat you like that. I don't know. It's not an excuse, but I've had my own issues lately. Emily took a deep breath. She had hoped for an apology, but what she truly wanted was for Jessica to learn something from this encounter, to understand that assumptions and judgments didn't help anyone. Thank you, Emily said simply. Just remember that everyone has their own story. You don't know what someone's going through, and it's not fair to treat people like they're beneath you. With that, Emily turned away and began to walk back down the trail, her friends following her. She could feel Jessica's eyes on her, but for the first time all weekend, Emily didn't care. She had stood up for herself, for who she was, and that felt like a victory in itself. As they walked back toward the hotel, Emily realized that this weekend was more than just an escape from the world. It was about facing the challenges in her life head-on and deciding to take control of her own narrative. She wasn't just Keanu Reeves's daughter, she was Emily, a young woman who would no longer let anyone define her by anyone else's expectations. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for yourself and prove you weren't who others thought you were? How did it feel? Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. The tension between Emily and Jessica had finally reached a boiling point, and though the air was cleared, Emily still felt a lingering unease. For the first time during her stay, she allowed herself to take a deep breath and truly absorb the serenity of the hotel's surroundings. She was trying to shake off the drama, but it had left a mark, and it was hard to ignore. Her heart still raced, and the weight of the confrontation hung heavily in her chest. That evening, as the sun set, the hotel hosted a fancy gala for its elite guests. A string quartet played softly in the background, and guests mingled in elegant attire, sipping champagne under twinkling lights. Emily's friends were eager to attend the event, so they'd spent hours preparing, and Emily had decided to join them. Despite everything, she wanted to at least try to enjoy the night. When she arrived at the gala, Emily was greeted by the sparkling atmosphere and the bright, welcoming smiles of other guests. The setting was everything you could expect from a luxury hotel: opulent decorations, grand chandeliers, and perfectly manicured lawns. But something about it felt foreign to her. She'd grown up in the spotlight, but this was different. This wasn't a movie premiere or an event with her dad. This was supposed to be just another weekend getaway, a break from all the craziness, yet she felt anything but relaxed. As Emily made her way through the crowd, her mind kept circling back to Jessica. It wasn't just the rude interactions or the way Jessica had mocked her, it was that she couldn't escape the feeling that no matter where she went, people would never see her for who she truly was. People didn't look at Emily and think about who she was on the inside. They thought about the last name she carried, the famous father she had. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. Emily glanced down at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. It was a message from her dad. Dad, I know you're probably having a good time. Just wanted to remind you to have fun and be yourself. You deserve it. Love you, kid. For a brief moment, Emily felt a warmth wash over. Her Keanu had always been there for her no matter what. His words gave her comfort, but they also reminded her of something she had been avoiding, her identity. Not the one people tried to box her into based on her last name, but the real Emily, the girl who loved books, long hikes, and making memories with her friends, the girl who didn't want to be defined by her father's fame. She quickly typed a reply, "Emily, thanks, Dad, I'll try. Love you too." As she pocketed her phone and turned back to join her friends, her attention was suddenly pulled toward the other side of the ballroom. A tall man in a sharp black suit had entered the room, and there was an immediate shift in the atmosphere. The guests seemed to straighten up, a hushed murmur passing through the crowd as the man made his way toward the stage at the front. Emily recognized him instantly, the manager. But it wasn't just any manager. He was more than that. It was the hotel owner. The moment he stepped onto the stage, all eyes were on him. He had an air of authority, a natural charisma that demanded attention. The room fell silent as he took the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," the man said, his deep voice booming through the speakers. "It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our annual gala. Tonight is a celebration of our guests and our team. Each and every one of you plays an integral part in making this place what it is. Without you, we wouldn't be able to offer the kind of luxury that we pride ourselves on." The applause that followed was respectful, but Emily's gaze stayed locked on the man at the front of the room. She didn't know why, but there was something oddly familiar about him. He seemed more approachable than some of the other hotel staff, and then a realization hit her like a lightning bolt. Wait. The man's name, which had been mentioned briefly earlier, started to click in her mind. His name was Mark Henley. But what struck her more than his identity was the faint feeling that she had seen him before. Before she could make the connection, he continued speaking. "Now, as most of you know, our hotel is more than just a place to stay. It's a haven for people seeking refuge, relaxation, and a break from the everyday stresses of life. We pride ourselves on creating an environment that fosters not just luxury, but also peace of mind." Emily's pulse quickened. Refuge? Relaxation? Is he trying to sell us something? But the man's next words completely shocked her. "As a special guest tonight," Mark said, "we have someone truly special with us. It's not every day we get to host such an esteemed individual, so I ask that you all join me in giving a warm welcome to Emily Reeves." The room erupted in applause and Emily froze. Her mind was a blur. She looked around and suddenly all eyes were on her. She couldn't breathe. How did he know? What was happening? She felt her hands start to tremble, her legs suddenly weak. Beneath her, she took a step back, trying to keep her composure. This wasn't supposed to happen. But before she could process what was going on, Mark continued. "Emily, of course, is not only a beloved guest of our hotel, but also the daughter of the one and only Keanu Reeves. It's a pleasure to have you." "Here, Emily, we're truly honored." Emily's heart dropped into her stomach. So he knew all along. The applause seemed to stretch on forever. She could feel the heat of everyone's eyes burning into her. This wasn't just an acknowledgement of her father. It was a wave of recognition she wasn't ready for. She hadn't asked for this. This wasn't her world. But the most jarring realization of all came when she noticed Jessica in the crowd, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror as she stared at Emily. There was a moment where their gazes locked, and Jessica's expression was full of shock, regret, and a hint of fear. Emily's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The room felt like it was spinning. The pressure was overwhelming. Was this what it would always be like? This wasn't just about being Keanu Reeves's daughter. It was about feeling like she was being trapped in a persona she never wanted. She had wanted peace, freedom, but all she could feel now was the weight of everyone's expectations, the relentless gaze of the world on her shoulders. Have you ever been thrust into a situation where you didn't feel ready or wanted? How did you handle the pressure? Share your thoughts below, and make sure you hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next as Emily's journey takes yet another unexpected turn. The applause eventually died down, but Emily still stood frozen at the center of the ballroom, feeling like a deer caught in the headlights. She could hear her friends' voices calling her name softly from the side, but their words felt distant, muffled. She felt the eyes of every guest in the room upon her, and she hated it. The sudden spotlight felt suffocating. This wasn't how it was supposed to be, she thought, her heart racing. The attention was supposed to be on her father, not her. She had never wanted to be the center of this kind of attention. She just wanted a break from the expectations that came with her last name. As the applause died down, Mark Henley's voice boomed across the room again, snapping her back to reality. "Emily, I know you're probably feeling overwhelmed," Mark said with a knowing smile, "but it's important to let people know how special they are. Your father has been a great friend to our hotel, and now we're lucky enough to have you here. Enjoy the evening. This is your moment too." The words felt like a weight being dropped on her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt her walls break down. Her heart felt heavy, her chest tightening as her emotions bubbled to the surface. She didn't know whether she was angry, frustrated, or just plain tired of everything. But more than anything, she felt exposed. The world saw her as a part of her father's legacy, not as herself. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to move through the crowd. She needed air, she needed space. She made her way out of the ballroom and into the quiet of the hotel's grand terrace. The cool night air hit her face as she stepped outside, and she immediately felt a sense of relief. She leaned against the stone railing, looking out over the landscape. The trees stretched out for miles, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The peacefulness of the natural world around her was a stark contrast to the chaos she'd just experienced. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, taking deep, steadying breaths. "This isn't who I am," she told herself. "I'm not just Keanu's daughter. I'm Emily. I deserve to be seen for who I truly am, not for who my father is." The weight of the spotlight, of the constant expectations, had become too much. But now, in the quiet of the night, she realized something important. She could choose how she responded to it. She had been running from her identity for so long, trying to hide from the reality of her family's fame. She'd never asked for it, but she also didn't have to let it define her. The world might see her as a product of her father's success, but Emily had the power to change the narrative. She had the power to define herself. Just then she heard footsteps approaching, and she turned to see Megan, Sarah, and Lily walking toward her. They'd clearly given her some space, but now they were ready to stand by her side. "Hey, you. Okay?" Megan asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, I just needed a minute. It's a lot." "I can't even imagine," Sarah said softly, leaning against the railing beside her. "You handled it like a champ, though. I would have been freaking out if I were you." Emily chuckled softly, feeling a bit of the tension lift. "It's hard to keep it together when everyone's staring at you like you're some kind of zoo exhibit," she admitted. Lily smiled warmly. "You're not an exhibit, Em. You're our friend, that's what matters. And if anyone can rise above this, it's you." Emily met her friend's eyes, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over her. They hadn't treated her like an extension of her father. They had treated her like Emily, the person she was. She realized then that they were the ones who truly saw her. They were the ones who knew her for who she was beneath the surface. "I just don't know how to handle it all," Emily said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. "I never asked for this attention, you know, and when people treat me like I'm only his daughter, it feels like I'm losing myself." Megan placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Emily, you're not losing yourself. You're just figuring out how to be you, and no one can take that away from you. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. You just need to be you, and we'll be right here with you, every step of the way." Emily took a deep breath, her friend's words sinking in. They were right. She had spent so much time running from her identity, trying to escape the expectations placed on her because of her father. But it was time to embrace who she truly was. "I guess I needed to hear that," Emily said, her voice more steady now. "I've been so focused on trying to hide from who I am, I forgot to just live. I don't need to prove anything to anyone." Megan smiled. "Exactly. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You're Emily, and that's enough." As the three of them stood together on the terrace, watching the stars flicker above them, Emily felt something inside her shift. The pressure that had been weighing on her for so long began to ease. She realized that the real power lay in how She chose to carry herself, not in how others saw her. For the first time since she'd arrived at the hotel, she felt like herself again. She was no longer just the daughter of a famous actor. She was Emily, a young woman on a journey to find her own path, to create her own identity, and to embrace the complexities of who she was. And that, she realized, was something no one could take away from her. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to redefine who you are or stand up for what you believe in? How did you handle it? Share your story with us in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe to keep following Emily's journey. The road ahead is only going to get more interesting. The night was winding down, but Emily felt a newfound sense of calm. The chaotic swirl of emotions, the pressure to be someone she wasn't, had melted away, and in its place was a sense of clarity. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to be anyone but herself. As she walked back into the ballroom with her friends, the atmosphere seemed lighter. The guests were mingling, laughter filling the air, but Emily no longer felt like an outsider. There was still some tension lingering, especially with Jessica, but it no longer held the same weight. Emily had found her footing. Megan nudged her as they approached the bar. "You doing okay?" Emily nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "Yeah, I think I am. I'm just grateful, you know, for you guys. You've always had my back, even when I didn't know how to handle everything." "Always," Sarah said, giving her a quick hug. "Your family, Em." The words lingered in the air, and for the first time that evening, Emily felt a true sense of belonging, not because of her father's fame, but because of the real connection she had with the people around her. As the evening wore on, the initial discomfort faded, and Emily found herself actually enjoying the gala. She didn't care that people whispered about her or that the manager had introduced her as the daughter of Keanu Reeves. She cared about the conversations she had with her friends, the genuine laughter they shared, and the sense of normalcy she had been craving all along. But even as the night came to a close, Emily knew that the journey wasn't over. The conflict with Jessica had only just begun to simmer down, and the spotlight would always be there waiting for her. But now she had a better understanding of how to navigate it. She didn't have to be overwhelmed by it. She could control how she responded, how she defined herself. As they made their way out of the ballroom and into the cool night air, Emily paused at the door. She turned back for a moment, taking in the sight of the hotel, the lavish decor, the staff and the guests. She wasn't just Emily, Keanu Reeves's daughter. She was Emily, someone who could find peace in the chaos, someone who could rise above the expectations and stand tall, regardless of who her father was. But more than that, she was someone who had learned to trust herself, to trust her own voice, and to remember that it was okay to let go of the fear of being defined by others. "Thank you," she whispered to herself, looking at the hotel one last time, "for everything." As Emily stepped into the car, the world outside was a blur of lights and movement. The evening had been an unexpected mix of tension, revelation, and growth. And though Emily knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, there would always be moments of doubt, confusion, and struggle. She was ready to face them. She was ready to be herself, unapologetically. And as the car drove off into the night, Emily couldn't help but smile, knowing that no matter where her journey took her, she would always have the strength to rise above it all. Have you ever had a moment where you had to stand up for who you are, despite what others thought? What helped you find your voice? Share your story with us in the comments below. Don't forget to hit subscribe. The journey is just beginning, and there's so much more ahead. More twists, more growth, and more moments of self-discovery. You won't want to miss what happens next. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling different. The weight that had been pressing down on her for the past several days had lifted. She wasn't sure if it was because the night had ended on a peaceful note or if it was the quiet reflection she'd had while standing outside on the terrace, but something had changed inside of her. She had made a decision. It was time to stop living in the shadow of her father's fame. It was time to live for herself. She could hear the soft sounds of the morning, birds chirping, the breeze rustling through the trees, and it gave her a sense of calm. For the first time in ages, Emily didn't feel the pressure of everyone's eyes on her. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to redefine who she was and how she wanted the world to see her. Her phone buzzed beside her on the nightstand. It was a message from her dad. "Dad, good morning, kiddo. Just wanted to remind you that you're amazing. I hope today's better than the last one. Remember, you're in control. Love you." Emily smiled softly as she read his message. Keanu's support meant everything to her, and while she loved him dearly, she knew it was time to stand on her own feet. After reading the message, Emily decided to head down to breakfast with her friends. She walked into the dining area of the hotel, where the usual morning bustle was taking place. The staff was efficiently setting up the buffet, and guests were chatting in hushed tones as they sipped their coffee. Emily felt a wave of gratitude for the normalcy of the moment. For a fleeting second, she felt like just another person on vacation, not the daughter of a famous actor. She made her way to the table where Megan, Sarah, and Lily were already seated. "Good morning," Sarah greeted, her eyes lighting up when she saw Emily. "How's the morning treating you?" "It's peaceful," Emily replied, taking a seat. "For the first time in a while I feel calm." "Good. You deserve that," Megan added with a grin. "You've had a lot on your plate these last few days," Emily nodded. "It's been a crazy few days, but I think I've finally figured it out. I'm not going to let my last name define me anymore. I'm going to live my life for me, not for anyone else's expectations." Lily raised her glass of orange juice and toasted Emily. "To living for yourself and not for the world's idea of who you should be." They all clinked glasses, and Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Her friends truly understood her. They didn't care who her father was. They cared about her, Emily, the person she was becoming. As they chatted over breakfast, the conversation inevitably shifted to what would come next. Emily had planned to leave the hotel and head home later that afternoon, but she knew this trip had taught her something valuable. She had to take this newfound clarity and carry it with her beyond the confines of the hotel. The world wouldn't stop seeing her as Keanu Reeves' daughter. But now, it didn't matter. She had learned how to stand her ground, how to embrace who she was, and most importantly, how to embrace the people who loved her for the right reasons. As they finished their breakfast, Emily's phone buzzed again, and she smiled when she saw the message. "Dad, just wanted to check in. How's everything?" "Going, Emily. I'm doing good, Dad. Feeling better. Thanks for always being there for me, Dad." "Always, kiddo. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. You're never alone." Emily stared at the screen for a moment, her heart swelling. Her dad's words were simple, but they meant the world to her. She didn't need to feel weighed down by the expectations of others. She had her own life to live, her own story to tell. As the morning sun shone through the windows, Emily felt ready to move forward. There would still be challenges, still moments of doubt, but she was prepared. She didn't need to hide behind her father's fame anymore. She didn't need to live up to anyone's standards but her own. This was her journey now. Have you ever had a moment when you realized that your life was your own to control? How did it change your perspective? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The day was drawing to a close, and Emily felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. The hotel was quieter now. Most of the guests had checked out and the atmosphere was calm. Emily stood by the window of her suite, gazing out at the landscape. The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm golden glow over the horizon. Her phone buzzed once more, breaking the silence. She looked down at the message. "Dad, you ready to come home?" Emily smiled softly. The support she had gotten from her father over the last few days had been a steady comfort, a reminder that he was always there for her, no matter what. But she also knew that she was ready to step out on her own and start living the way she wanted to, without hiding behind the comfort of her father's shadow. Emily. "Yeah, I'm ready. But I've learned a lot, Dad. More than I expected." Dad. "That's good to hear. You've always been stronger than you think. Don't forget that." The text made her feel a sense of warmth. Keanu had always been a guiding figure in her life, but she was starting to feel confident that she could take on the world by herself. She didn't need to follow in his footsteps. She could carve her own path. She was done feeling like she had to live up to an image that others had for her. She was Emily, a woman with her own dreams, aspirations, and desires. She turned away from the window and walked toward the suitcase she had packed earlier. The decision to leave the hotel was not an easy one. She had always associated this place with pressure, expectations, and a never-ending need to be on. But now it was more than just a hotel. It was a symbol of the change she was going through. As she zipped up her suitcase, Emily took one last look around the suite. The memories from the last few days, the gala, the awkward moments, the lessons learned, would stay with her. They had shaped her into someone stronger, someone more willing to embrace herself fully. She wasn't just a daughter anymore. She was her own person, and that was more than enough. At the airport later that evening, Emily sat in the terminal, waiting for her flight back home. She watched the bustle of people around her, families, businessmen, solo travelers, each with their own stories, their own paths. She thought about the events of the last few days and how they had brought her to this point. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, and confrontation, but ultimately it had led her to a place of self-empowerment, and now Emily was ready to take that energy with her as she moved forward. Her phone buzzed again. It was Megan. "Megan, I'm so proud of you, Em. You've got this. I can't wait to see what you do next." Emily smiled, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. She wasn't alone in this journey. Her friends, her dad, the people who truly cared about her, they were her support system. They didn't see her as the daughter of Keanu Reeves. They saw her as Emily, someone worthy of love and respect regardless of her family name. Emily: "Thanks, Meg. I'll keep you posted. Let's catch up soon, okay?" Megan: "For sure. Take care of yourself. You've got this." As Emily typed out her reply, she realized something important. She didn't have to have it all figured out right now. She was still on a journey, and that journey was hers to define. There would be days of uncertainty, of challenges, and of learning more about herself. But she was okay with that. She was ready for it. Back at home a few days later, Emily sat on the couch in her living room, her feet tucked up underneath her. The house was quiet, just the way she liked it. She didn't feel the need to go out or socialize constantly anymore. Instead, she was starting to find comfort in her own company, in the moments of stillness where she could hear her own thoughts. There was a knock at the door. "Coming," she called out as she got up. She opened it to find her father standing there holding a bag of takeout. "I thought you might be hungry," he said with a grin. Emily smiled warmly, stepping aside to let him in. "You're the best, Dad." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "I know," he joked, but his eyes softened as he placed the food on the kitchen counter. "Everything's been crazy," Emily admitted, settling into a chair. "But I think I'm figuring things out." Keanu sat across from her, taking a moment to just watch her. His daughter had grown. She had come into her own in a way that made him proud. He knew it hadn't been easy, but he also knew that Emily was stronger than she realized. "I'm proud of you," Keanu said quietly, his voice full of sincerity. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're already enough." Emily's heart swelled with love for him. "Thanks, Dad, that means a lot." The two of them sat in comfortable silence for a while, eating and chatting. It wasn't about the fame or the expectations. It was about the connection they shared as father and daughter. And so Emily's journey continued. She had learned to embrace the challenges and the confusion, to rise above the expectations that others had for her, and most importantly, to be true to herself. No one could define who she was, only she could do that. And as she took her first steps into this new chapter of her life, she knew one thing for sure. The road ahead would be full of surprises, but she was ready for them, because this was her life, and she was going to live it the way she wanted. Have you ever faced a moment where you realized you didn't need to live up to others' expectations? How did you find the courage to follow your own path? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your story with us in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe. There's always more to come in Emily's journey, and you won't want to miss the twists and turns that are ahead. Stay tuned for more of her journey into self-discovery.